Hello everybody, it's Eric from Trimmed and Burning, and on today's episode, we're going to be talking about the third and final rebellion that the ancient people believed set the stage for the world today, and to explain why things are the way they are. So this is the Tower of Babel story that some of you are familiar with, but you're probably going to learn some new things today that you didn't know that the ancients believed. So it starts out in Genesis 10, where we get the Table of Nations, and it starts talking about the 70 nations that came from the Tower of Babel saga. And at this point, there were no Jews or Gentiles. There was just the human race. But as you read the Bible further on, it's going to talk a lot about the difference between Jews and Gentiles, and this all comes out from this third rebellion, the story of the Tower of Babel. Now, the Tower of Babel story takes place in Genesis 11. We learn about Nimrod. Now, Nimrod was the great-grandson of Noah. And if you remember, Noah was the one who survived through the flood, that God saved through the flood. So it only took to his great-grandson until another rebellion happened. And Nimrod lived up to his name. It meant, we will rebel. And he surely did rebel. Nimrod was the world's first dictator. And he built cities such as Babel and Nineveh. And if you're familiar with the Bible, and if you're not, later on we'll learn that Nineveh was the capital of Assyria and there was Babylon, and these two really wreaked havoc on Israel and the kingdom. So this all starts here with Nimrod at the Tower of Babel. Now remember, God said to be fruitful and to multiply. Even after Noah, he put this command back into place for humans to be fruitful and multiply together. But Nimrod did the opposite of what God requested. Instead of them being fruitful, multiplying, and going throughout the world, Nimrod brought the people together. Now at this time, they all spoke one language, and God recognized they are very powerful, speaking one language and working together. But they had worked together according to Nimrod's orders to build a ziggurat, or this tower, to God. They were going to be like God. And the ancient people even believed that he also built the tower so high to avoid another flood, kind of mocking God that he could not flood them out again. But the ancients believed that he was building somewhat of a stargate or a portal to the spirit realm so they could ascend higher and be like God, just like Satan tried to be like God. It's the sin of humans to want to try to be like God, the sin of pride. And this is where the beginning of Babylon and Zion comes. This theme originates here in this story. Now, Babylon is a man-made city, or a city that does things man's way. Today we see that in our cities like New York City and Madrid and all these other cities throughout the world. You'll see where man is doing things their own way. Now Zion is doing things God's way. The city of God is Zion. And Jerusalem is Zion. And even though today Jerusalem's not doing things God's way exactly, one day everything will be done as Jesus says in the city of God. But this is where this originates. Babylon and Zion. Babylon doing things in the sinful human way, and Zion doing things God's way. But in this story of the Tower of Babel, we learn that God, confuses them with languages and splits them into 70 nations. You guys might be familiar with that. But what some aren't familiar with is the gods over the nations, of the disinherited nations. So what God did when he split them up into 70 nations is he disinherited them, meaning he put another spiritual being in charge of their nation. God looked at them and basically said, you know what? We had the garden incident. We had the Noah incident. I tried to bring you through the flood, and you guys are still rebelling only a few generations later. So God appointed them with other gods or spiritual beings. And again, God doesn't mean, Yahweh God. He is the one true God. This term of God just means high, powerful spiritual beings that Yahweh created, but have a lot of power. And God put them over the 70 nations here. Now, the first commandment, if you're familiar with the 10 Commandments, says, thou shalt have no other gods before me. And this is exactly what Yahweh is referring to. These other gods, these other spiritual beings that people were worshiping, these spiritual beings that were leading the 70 nations. Now, these beings are high-ranking spirits. These are not angels. Angels are a different ranking. These gods are sometimes referred to as princes. And these are the ones that even today rule over the nations. Now, there are many gods in other religions. You'll know of the Romans and the Greeks, Hinduism. Other religions talk about many gods, and they might have some true reality to it according to the Bible. The difference is they're not worshiping Yahweh, and they haven't accepted Jesus Christ as their Savior as Yahweh designed. But there is some truth that there are other gods. Again, Yahweh is the one true God, but these gods are powerful spirits under Yahweh that still have a lot of power over humanity. And these are the gods over the disinherited nations that we learn about in the Tower of Babel. Now this sets up the rest of the story. Yahweh versus the gods. This is the rest of the Bible story. Yahweh versus the gods. These spirits still rule the nations today. All nations except for Israel. And in the next episode, we're going to learn a little bit more about Israel and how they came to be. But in every other nation, it's ruled by these gods or these evil spirit beings. We see Haman from Persia in the Bible later on, possibly listening to these gods, getting advice from these gods to want to kill the Jews or God's people. And we saw more recently in history Hitler from Germany, who tried to kill the Jews, who are God's people, God's nation. And he was into the occult and probably listened to these kinds of gods that have continually been wanting to wipe out God's people to stop God's plan from happening. They're always trying to attack God's plan, but we know God's promises are true and they will never fail. But right now it's the gods and Yahweh battling to be God over man, over humanity. And we're going to learn in the next episode that God's going to call his own nation. It's not over yet. Originally, it probably looked like it was over, that there was no hope. There were 70 nations with 70 other gods, and Yahweh was no longer overseeing them. But this is all according to God's plan. And in the next episode, we're going to learn about the call of Abram and Genesis 12, and it'll make sense why it follows the Tower of Babel. This is God calling out his own nation, the 71st nation, so to speak, that he will redeem the Gentile nations. All those 70 nations that we just learned about, they're disinherited, they are considered the Gentile nations. This is where the Jews and the Gentiles come from. Jews being of Israel and Gentiles being of every other nation that is not Israel. But we're going to learn about that in the next episode, the call of Abram and Israel. If you like this video, please go ahead and click like, subscribe, and after you subscribe, click the bell notification so you can be alerted of more videos. And please be sure to share this link with friends and family so they can learn more about the Bible and what it says and God's plan for them, that he sent Jesus Christ to die on the cross for their sins just like he did for us. But thank you again for watching, everybody. I am Eric, and until next time, keep your lamps trimmed and burning.
Almost over, almost over, almost over.